Yeah, it's a bit high. What's it doing? Hey guys, laptopy here. This is our weekly Q&A. I've just got my laptop up. It looks a little bit high. Anyway, that's okay. I think I'm just sorting myself out here, guys. Okay. Make sure everything is there. I'm gonna just move. I'm getting myself organized because I've got some really good questions today to answer. So I'm just my apologies for being a little bit late this morning. I didn't have any Wi-Fi. I recharged my little modem last night, but I didn't plug it in properly, so I've woken up to no Wi-Fi. I live out rural, so it was really hard because no Wi-Fi, no connection to doing lives or anything like that. So I had to give my little girl here, my little modem, a bit of a charge up, and we're all good now. Love my little modem. She does very well for living out rural. Okay, let me just make sure I can see comments. Cool. Okay. So this is our weekly Q&A. If anyone doesn't know me, I'm Karen. I am an Off The Track Thoroughbred retrainer, and I specialize in retraining off the track thoroughbreds using holistic rehabilitation and compassionate training. So a big welcome to all our new members in the group. It's lovely to have you here. I put up a welcome post yesterday, but just letting you know that we do a weekly I do a weekly Q&A here in the group. I'll have to change and normally it's Sundays at 8 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, but I'm changing it now to Monday, so I can do Sunday next week. Anyway, it's weekly. Anyway, I've just had to make a few different changes because I have my trimmer coming out and doing my horses on Sundays at the moment. So, anyway, yeah. So expect a weekly Q&A in the group. If you have any questions, you can pop up a post. And I always do a reminder notification. You can put them in the comments below, or you can just pop up a post anytime in the group and ask if it can be addressed in the weekly Q&A. Yeah, so thank you for being in the group, everybody. I have a couple of questions. I wanted to talk about a couple of things this morning, so I've got to find them because one's in an email and one was a comment made on one of the posts I put up. So I'm just thinking which one, because it's quite detailed. It's not detailed, but I'm just thinking which one to go for first. I think I might go for it's fresh in my mind, so I think I might go for the turn one. So let me just have a look here. Sorry, I'm just finding the question. I have to go into the page. I'm just going to go on the page, guys, and find that. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So I'm just reading. This is for you, Sam. Where you mentioned, just reading your comment. So this is for Sam Taylor Leeton, and we're just talking. So Sam you put a comment on when I put a post. We're talking about training tip Tuesdays, troubleshooting straightness, and that was an Equitation Science post. And you actually had some really good questions, and that's why I wanted to talk about them in today's live, because it's sort of common, and I do remember myself, I was getting very confused. Equitation science it's wonderful. It takes a little bit of breaking down because riding and horses and training horses is so complex. And sometimes we really just need to break things down into simple, basic steps and see and try and step out of our perception of how we think the horse sees the world and try and put ourselves in their shoes, literally, which is really hard. I mean, it's hard for, putting ourselves in anyone's shoes, especially in animals, if we don't know how they experience the world. But to become a really good, to be a good horse trainer and do the best that we can, we sort of need to try and do that. So I'm just reading your comment here, Sam. He's not to the arena, no problem staying in track. Oh, grass affected. Okay. So in a way, it is random. So we're talking about spooking here. In a way, it is random spooking because he's occasionally finding new things to spook at. And predictable because he's spooking at everything, specifically the sides of the school. To try and help him relax, I get off and walk him in hand near the areas and gradually get closer. Let him stop and look, ask him to lower his head and neck top line release for relaxation. Let him stand there and give him scratches. We've done groundwork in there, use positive reinforcement. In the outdoor, he was still very scared of the corners of the school. You could see the hard V-shaped above his eye. So we gave up trying to ride in there for now. In the indoor, he seemed fine with me on the ground, unless someone went past the door from the outside. But as soon as I got back on, he was spooking at it again. This is quite out of character for him. He's not usually that spooky at all, and suddenly he might jump. But now he's snorting, flaring nostrils, head in the air, not wanting to go forward, almost like he's never been in there before. I've been riding in the same arenas for 6 months without issues. He weren't even that spooked when he first arrived. This has only been the past week, so I'm putting it down to spring grass. He's also been funny, not wanting me to groom him. This is why I have issues with the have an issue with the article. No amount of forcing him onto the track is going to fix this spooking. Yes. Okay. Excellent question. And this is why. So for anyone, if you're on, so I posted an article. On Equitation Science, troubleshooting straightness. I'm going to go over this. So it says, for major losses in lines such as shying or swerving, train the horse to go as close as possible to the walls and any other lines available with one forehoof. So this is a very excellent, this is a very good training tool. But you have to be aware that you have to train the turn before you even get to this. And this is why it's really important to understand equitation science, the equitation science principles, and going back to retraining your basic responses: stop, go, turn, and yield. So you're not going to be able to do this exercise when it's troubleshooting straightness if you haven't trained the turn correctly. I've been doing this a lot with this a horse that I have in retraining, actually. Not that he spooks, but he drifts. So just going, but you'll find this post that I put up in the group. For major losses of lines such as shying or swerving, train the horse to go as close as possible to the walls and any other lines available with one forehoof. When he follows your lines without drifting, try riding along the outside wall fence of the arena. I won't read the whole post because basically what it's saying, I'm just going to put my little heaty on here because my dog's cold. I've got Minnie sitting on my lap. Say hello, Minnie. Hello, man. She sits on my lap. It's cold here this morning. So we're talking about spooking. So Sam has a problem with her horse spooking. And I put up a post saying how to correct spooking with training. So if the horse deviates the forefront, their forefeet off the line, so you can imagine your horse is traveling straight, and all of a sudden, wow, it spooks at something in the arena. So one aspect to correct that with training is to be able to control your horse's front feet, and this is the turn aid, so this goes back to your rein aids and your stop response, by slowing their legs down and taking their forefoot back onto the outside track. So Sam's saying she's got a problem with the article because no matter what, this is why I have an issue. No amount of forcing him onto the track is going to fix this spooking. Absolutely. Now, this is why I look at, I have the approach of holistic rehabilitation. So if you if any behavior problems, whether it be shying, spooking, aggressiveness, bucking, rearing, the whole lot, the first thing you do is you need to eliminate any other causes for it. Be it, and a big thing is feed, and you're saying that you think your horse is grass affected. So just looking at your story, so this live is actually going off topic here. I was going to talk about correcting spooking, but I think we need to address this because there's a reason why your horse is behaving the way it is, and you've done the good analysis that he's normally not like that, and that it's more so the last week. So that's saying that something's changed. You're saying grass affected. Now, grass and pasture can have a massive effect on horses. I know myself this time last year, particularly, I don't know where you are, Sam. I'm not sure if you're in Australia, but the Australian pasture where I am, anyway, I have major problems in autumn and spring. Behavior problems as well as physical problems with them reacting to the fructose in the pasture and mycotoxins. Behavior wise, they get really spooky. You mentioned here your boy, you can see the wrinkles on his eye, so he's very hyperreactive. So spooking is a hyperreactive response, and if you're on edge, just say you're anxious, you're on edge. Now that can happen because of feed. Okay, so lack of magnesium, lack of calcium. With my horses, the pasture really affects them. My big fellow can, all of a sudden, he's just so spooky and flighty that he'll go over the top of me. You can see he's on edge. Now, that's not to do with his training, though in saying that his training does, he's on the ground, like in-hand training, does need reinforcing and refreshing. I haven't retrained him the way I do now. He's been with me for a long while, but I see a massive change in his behavior. Squiggles. My dog's always barking the lives. And he'll get hyper, like sort of very hyper reactive and darting at anything. So I agree with you. I think it's very much related to something to do with the feed, and that's the first thing that you need to address. So any behavior problem that you're having, you need to, before you go to the training side of it, you need to look at, okay, well, why is this happening? Has it always been there? Could it be related to anything else? Just say badly fitting tack, a change in the environment, change in pasture feed. Pasture's massive. There's a page called Calm Healthy Horses. Let me know if you want me to pop it in the group. She is fantastic. She's an equine nutritionist, and she talks about all this type of behavior when it comes to pasture related behaviors. And I know from first-hand experience a massive change within days of my horses. Particularly my big 17-hand horse, who's not fun. You know, his eyes were just bulging out of his head and looking at things, and I'm like, I just feel like he's just about to explode, and that's not his normal nature. So I think what you're looking at here, Sam, is definitely not a training issue. Not that I'm saying the training, I have no doubt probably if you've got a green off the track thoroughbred, that in-hand work is still going to need to be retrained to light responses, etc., to proof level. But you sound like you've actually got some problems with your horse reacting to the pasture. Now, what happens here? So you've said he's also being funny, not wanting you to groom him. So this is where you have to go. You can read articles. So you say you have an issue with the article. Absolutely insane. The article's great. It's a great tip. But you have to, if you've got a behavior problem, once again, go back to what's causing it, because every behavior, conflict behavior that happens in a horse, a lot of them aren't to do with training. A lot of them are to do with pain. Once again, being grass affected, feed affected, ulcers, muscle soreness, some type of unsoundness. So you need to eliminate those before you then approach the training side of it. So I really want to reinforce that. And then you go, okay, well, and you, as you said, you've noticed different changes in his behavior the last week. So with being a horse owner and a trainer, you need to be a little bit like a detective. You need to have the approach of like, okay, I've got to work out what's happening here. You can't just put it down to training. So yeah, I think that you've got pasture-related problems. How does pasture relate? Now this is a minefield in itself. Their gut's really important. Now this is what I was going to talk about this. There's so much to talk about, but I had another email from someone who was having problems with their off the track thoroughbred, flighty, spooky, pushy behavior. I'm going to go to this email here. So I'll give you an example of how I work things out. Now, I've done this with quite a few clients or people that have just messaged me for help. My horse is flighty, spooky, blah, 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 blah. I don't go straight to the training side of it. So let me just go to this email. I hope he doesn't mind me reading it out. I'm sure he wouldn't. Okay. So I got a message from someone saying, hey Karen, I'm really struggling with my OTTB lately. He is very fizzy, flighty and pushing. I'm lost at the moment and unsure what to do. He's pushed me to the edge. So this is really, I mean, obviously this person is in a situation where he's very frustrated. He doesn't know what to do. And I've been there. I've been there many, many years ago with my horses. And it's like, oh my God, what do I do? And I know this gentleman, I've asked him. So the first thing that I did, so I'll just go back and go, okay, someone's come to me with that question. So how did I approach this? So the first thing I do is, I won't read you my whole email. So it's hard when you have problems with your horse and you don't know how to solve them, and that's why I'm here. That's why this group is here. That's why I teach what I do, and I teach a holistic approach, looking at all aspects of retraining your off the track thoroughbred, because it's not only about the training aspect of it. It's huge, especially with off the track thoroughbreds, because they've come from an industry, the racing industry, which is so highly demanding on them physically and mentally. And not only that, the retraining is a really, really important part of it. There's especially retraining your stop and go, because mostly off the track thoroughbreds will be very heavy in the rein. They won't stop very well at all. They'll be on the forehand, but you really there's a lot to look at when retraining an off the track thoroughbred. It's not simple. And I've noticed a lot of the retraining information that out there has a one-track approach. They don't really look at any other aspects of behaviour straight into the riding or the training. Even if you do groundwork, it's straight into the training. That's not the first step with retraining an off-the-track thoroughbred. The actual rehabilitation part of it is. And also learning, being a horseman and learning so much. There is so much to learn. Like Sam, for instance, your issues with pasture, well, that's just a world in itself of learning about how horses are pasture affected. Then you look at hind gut health and gastric health and all of that, which I think is what you're having problems with. And it can really affect the horse's hind gut and the horse's gastric health is so important for calm behavior. And you can't retrain an off-the-track thoroughbred. You can't retrain any horse if they are having problems with their hind gut and it's causing behavior, hyperactive behavior, pain, something like that. So you really have to address the health of their whole digestive system. And this is where I went with this email. So I'll share this with you. So I've said, I'm sorry to hear that he's having problems, and I know how hard it is, because I do know how hard it is to work out what's causing it, especially when you don't have, as I said back in my earlier days. And I mean, I'm like, depending on other trainers, other instructors, especially when you're not experienced, and you're depending on other people's advice, which we all do. Especially in the early days when I got my my off-the-track thoroughbred, my other horse. I mean, I had no idea. I didn't even know about ulcers. Seriously, I didn't even know. This is way back. I didn't know about ulcers for a long time. It's just not really mentioned and spoke. Well, it wasn't back then. It's a lot more out there in mainstream education when it comes to equine health and well-being and things like that, and retraining off-the-track thoroughbreds. But back then, it just wasn't mentioned. And my off-the-track thoroughbred, both my horses would have definitely had gastric ulcers and hind gut ulcers and everything. And then I look at the feed that I was feeding them. Like, seriously, full-on grain feeds. I was a big grain feeder for years and years and years. And being a racing person, working in the racing industry for nearly 20 years, and my dressage and show jumping coaches never mentioned anything about feed, never mentioned anything about how the feed would affect my horse, or nothing, not even mentioning of having forage and height. Like, nothing was mentioned like that. Way before I even worked in racing, I was in the equestrian centre in Sydney, teaching in riding schools and that, and there was just no knowledge of equine nutrition, nothing like that. So I've been down this pathway, and I've struggled for years and years with my horses, so I know what it's like. So going back to this email, so the first thing I look at, so he's just to recap, he's sent me an email saying that he's having problems with his horse. He's very fizzy, flighty and pushing. Then I've asked, there's numerous reasons for this behavior, and I wanted a clearer picture. So I just asked how long he's had him for, how long he's been off the track, has he had any retraining, has he been scoped for gastric ulcers, and has he always been fizzy and flighty, or has his behavior only started recently? So I've said, without knowing any other details, fizzy and flighty behavior can often be caused by something in their diet. And it's really, you get this fizzy and flighty behavior, it is very often it's very often diet related. And I always look at diet first before I go to anywhere else. Just learning so much more about diet, learning so much more about how the feeds that we feed horses in the, our modern day equestrian and equine racing and performance feeds and that, how it's so damaging to the horse's hind gut and stomach and digestive system, and how it affects them in their behavior and their temperament. So I've asked that, and then that gives me a clearer look. So so he's very good with a reply. So this horse has been off the track for 3 years. So he got him not long after he retired from racing. He's had retraining, so he did send him to someone for retraining. He doesn't believe the trainer did any ground or manners work with him. Manners work, so horses aren't humans, so they don't have manners. We perceive it as manners, but it's all training. So I just thought I'd put that in. only rode him, so it sounds like his horse has gone to a retrainer, and the only work that's been done is straight in the saddle, which is really common. So then he was returned. He thinks he may have been filled up with something to calm him on his return. Feels like he's wasted a lot of money, which is common, you know, sending your horses away for retraining. Which is, I think it's very good to send your horses away for retraining, as long as you're sending them to the right retrainer, and also having the knowledge to be able to continue on when the horse gets back, and know how to, you know, maintain everything. So he hasn't had him scoped for gastric ulcers. He's had his usual vet checkup and everything. So he's always been fizzy and flighting. He's been most of the time. He said he did a lot of work with him and became very good for a period. Then he feels like he's back at square one. So he's now told me his current diet is 1 biscuit of hay in the morning. So I need to clarify what biscuit of hay it is. I think it's Lucerne. He gets 1 dipper of bran, so I need to clarify what bran it is. 2 dippers of Easy Feed conditioner, which is pellets, which is Pride's. Pride's is a very good feed company here in Australia. And he gets an equine stomach health powder, and yes, he's on pasture. Okay, so the first thing that I did was go, okay, let's have a look at, I saw a big red light, diet, big thing, issue with diet. So why is there an issue with this horse's diet? So then I go in and I work out. So the Lucerne chaff is fine. Okay, I wouldn't go to the pasture issues. I presume this person is in Australia because he calls Lucerne and not alfalfa. He also seems to feed, without knowing any more details, he also seems to feed Easy Feed conditioner, which is a Pride's Easy Feed conditioner. And I looked up the ingredients of Pride's Easy Feed conditioner. So this goes into the feed issue. So you've really got to look at what are you feeding your horse first of all. What ingredients are in the feed that you feed? So I highly recommend grain-free. Anything with grain in it is not ideal for your horse, for your off-the-track thoroughbred. Grain is not good for horses at all. And grain is snuck into a lot of these horse feeds. You don't think you're feeding grain, but you're feeding grain through byproducts. Now, I've got a big issue with wheat byproducts, and I wanted to go into further details with this particular diet and why I think this horse is fizzy and flighty. And you go into, so there's a lot of wheat byproducts. So I would avoid wheat. So I'll go, sorry, my phone's binging here. I'll go into, so I'm just gonna go through and show you how I've addressed this question, because it's really important to work out why your horse is flighty. So I'm going to now go. So I've found out what the horse is being fed. I wouldn't address pasture at the moment because I can see some more issues with the diet other than pasture. So I went in and let's have a look at Easy Feed conditioner. We know Pride's, if you're in Australia, is a very good feed company. I feed Pride's myself. I feed Pride's Easy Sport and Easy, what is it? It's really good. Easy Care, Easy something like that. It's a very good concentrated multivitamin mineral supplement. So Pride's, I really like Pride's. I also do Feed Excel, so I recommend anybody who has an off-the-track thoroughbred. Feed Excel is an equine nutrition calculator. Also, there's a website. And Nerida Richards is the founder of it. She's a wonderful equine nutritionist. She works worldwide. She works with Pride's companies, Pride's and High Gain, and it's a wealth of knowledge. The Feed Excel website and equine nutrition calculator, and it's a very good tool to have to give you knowledge when it comes to feeding your off-the-track thoroughbred. And a wonderful, the Facebook page is wonderful to read, and Facebook group is wonderful to reach out for help with feed-related issues. So Nerida has done an article on byproducts and how some of these feeds that are so-called grain-free aren't actually grain-free. Easy feed conditioner is a grain diet. So let's go in and look at what is in easy feed conditioner and what I decided to look at and thought, okay, I've screenshotted it here so I don't have to go through, if I can find it. Easy feed conditioner. Is that it? Oh no, that's I might have to go in and find it. Oh, here we go. Sorry guys, might have to go and find it. I'll go into my phone now and find it. So I'm a bit all rambly this morning, but I just think it's really good to understand this. And I thought I'd just share with you what I do when someone reaches out to me with a behavior problem. Wasn't what I planned for today's live because I have a few questions to ask, but I'll get to that. What is my phone doing? Go away, phone. Oh my gosh. Why is it doing this? Trying to get out. Oh, here we go. So I went in and I looked at easy feed conditioner. I also have an issue with feeding a horse bran, so I just need to clarify whether it is wheat bran, but without easy feed conditioner. Here we go. Okay, so easy feed conditioner is a weight gain and conditioning feed for horses. So the first thing is we've got an off the track thoroughbred. We want to put weight on them. Usually off the track thoroughbreds will be fairly light on. They've already got, if they've come from racing, they've already got some pretty serious gut issues happening. Because racing is a very highly concentrated, high starch, high grain diet, not good for gut health. So part of retraining your off the track thoroughbred is really rehabilitating their gut health. It's so important, and one of the first things you need to do when you get your off the track thoroughbred. So let's have a look at the easy feed conditioner, which is for weight gain. It's from a good company, so there's no issues with that, but what is an issue is the ingredients. So what's in easy feed conditioner? The first thing in easy feed conditioner is wheat. Wheat is a highly is a grain for a start. Wheat is very high starch. Okay, we don't want, so that it's non-structural carbohydrates, which is your high starch feeds, and we want to have our horse on a low starch, grain free, high forage diet. So the first issue that this horse may be contributing to this horse flighty and fizzy behavior is the diet, and that confirmed that with me when I saw what's in easy conditioner. Wheat, and of all grains, wheat. So wheat is like, so then you look at wheat, and this is why people will feed, you get a lot of these feeds, like even high gain, it's made out to be fiber essentials, high gain fiber essentials, and I know it's big over in the US, in United States. All these feeds are low starch, all of that, and you go and look into it, look into the ingredients. Meal mix, meal run, they have what do they call it, some other mix, okay, but meal mix, meal run, really bad for your horse because that is a wheat byproduct. Wheat is very bad for your horse. Why? One, it's a grain. Two, wheat is a bit like giving a child or give like a really massive sugar hit. Wheat is very high starch, is very high energy. We don't even feed it to racehorses. Like racehorses, it's oats and corn. You get the racehorse feed, and racehorse feed is, I very rarely see any, I've never seen any wheat in racehorse feeds. We've always had, you will get your oats and your corn. A lot of them so-called cool feeds, they will say horses can't tolerate oats, so you get your barley and your corn and that. But with racehorses, you don't want to feed a fatty feed. You want a high energy. So we don't even feed, generally wheat is not a feed in racing stables. So I don't know, wheat is obviously very high in starch, but it's obviously very conditioning as well. Like you think of your white bread and wheat bread and all of that, it's fattening, isn't it? They go and they try and fatten up animals. You get, I know a friend of mine, my ex-partner, he's my best friend, he he does pigs. You know, he's feeding on these pigs. He goes and picks up all the white bread, and you see with cattle to fatten them up for slaughter. So wheat is very fattening. It's not good. Now wheat, we even know in the human world, how wheat nowadays, but especially wheat nowadays, can very damage our gut health. Okay, so there's something in wheat that can damage your gut health. Wheat also too is there's a lot of modification that's happened with wheat over the years. You know, like 80, 90 years ago, the wheat wasn't, they've made it so that it grows faster, it's more resilient, so it's not the type of wheat that they used to have 100 years ago to what we have now. So wheat is not a good feed all round, and yet it's still used a lot, particularly in the cheaper horse feeds. This is not a cheap feed. I really like Pride's Feeds. It's actually my favourite feed company. And it's extruded wheat, but that's even worse. Well, it's not worse, but extruded wheat means it's digested even faster, so it's cooked, so it's going to be absorbed even faster. So wheat has a very high starch, and it goes straight, it turns into blood glucose very, very fast. Okay, so it goes straight to the brain. It's like getting this massive hit of sugar. So you can imagine how that's going to affect a horse. And then so we'll just go to the ingredients. The next one is soybean meals. They're extruded soybeans are really nice feed. There's not a problem with that. But then the third feed in line, so you always, with ingredients, usually the first feed is what is the basis of the feed and what's highest. So wheat is very high in this feed. Then your third feed is corn. Well, we all know corn is a very high energy feed. We feed racehorses quite often get corn because they have such high demands of exercise that it's used as a fuel to fuel muscle glycogen for sprinting and racing. Then you've got your barley. So the big three feeds, first for three of them are big grain feeds in easy conditioner. Then going down the line, you've got your lupins, which is a lovely feed. Love lupins. Faba beans, well, that's a protein. That's a good feed. And then you've got your canola oil and everything. And then your trace mineral and vitamin premix and your salt and your limestone. So they're all really good feeds down the bottom, but you see your first major feed. So the big red light would go off for this problem that's come up. Hot, fizzy, flighty horse on a grain feed for a start, and then on wheat, which makes it even worse because wheat goes to, I read somewhere, wheat will increase blood sugar levels double what a Mars bar would do in humans. Excuse me, I've got hiccups here. So you can imagine how much of a boost of energy that's going to give to your horse. Just in a sugar hit. So you're just giving your horse these massive sugar hits. And let's look at not only this extruded wheat, but look at all your other feeds like that will have secretly put in there your mill mix, your mill run, all that is a wheat your brand. So just say this horse is now also not only getting, so he's getting now this person, he's got a very, it's not this person's fault because that's why they're reaching out to me. We don't know. I was absolutely fed a big grain feeder. I was feeding these feeds without knowing what I was doing to my horses, and not so much what I was doing to my horses, but because it's not intentional, but we're listening to our guidance from coaches and instructors. Let's get your horse fat. Vets will even recommend a feed like this. Vets will recommend these types of feeds. So we really need to educate ourselves and understand the horse's gastrointestinal health to make decisions ourselves. And I'm down this path because of learning and also questions that I've asked and my own personal experience and being so passionate about I love learning and reading and that, and going grain free has been really only recent. I was still back in 2016 I was still feeding my horses barley, and I had one of my horses I nearly lost to laminitis. So this is not, I was still feeding horses grain back in 2016. I would have fed some feed like this. So let's now look at, so what is he getting? So then I'll look at the quantity, but it doesn't really matter. And quantity obviously is an issue, but you can't say, well, I'm only giving, now I've had an issue with someone else who asked me this question. I'm only giving them 1 cup. It does not matter. 1 cup is still going to affect your horse. If you're feeding easy conditioner, but you're still giving only 1 cup, it's still not good. Obviously, the more you feed, what happens is undigested grains go into the hind gut. Now, this is turned into an equine gut health Q&A, guys, but we'll go into that in a moment because this is what I think is happening. So then we'll look at, so we've got the grain feed, which is a problem. We've got how the quantity just to, so hay in the morning, pasture, good, as long as we're not having any pasture issues, but I don't think that's the main cause of this. Hay, we can look at whether it's loosened hay is good, but you would go to that identifying whether this horse now has enough forage, whether the pasture is very green and lush, and so he may not be getting the fibre that he needs. But before this is what I'm looking at here. So 2 dippers of, one dip, 2 dippers of easy feed conditioner. So I would say maybe 2 kilos, okay, and 1 kilo of bran. So that's a big feed of a night time. Big feed, massive overload of grain and starch, high starch, really high starch, like over 30%. So just that's giving you an example, over 30% of non-structural carbohydrates. So even like a dipper of bran can be over 30%. Like bran itself can be over 30% in non-structural carbohydrates. That's like high starch, massive sugar, red cordial hit to children. So you're thinking these are all these secret ingredients that are put in your low starch feeds, like your high gain fiber essentials, has meal run in it. I used to feed fiber essentials not knowing this back then. So big problem with the diet here. So the equine stomach health powder is going to do nothing at all, just a waste of money here. So imagine 1 dipper of bran, wheat bran, 2 dippers of easy feed conditioner mixed in with 2 dippers of loosened chaff. So first of all, just say this horse is a 500 kilo horse. We want to be looking at, we don't want to feed big feeds to start with because horses are grazing animals. We don't want to overload their stomach for this reason, which I'll go into. Horses only have a small stomach and they're designed to eat small amounts of feed all day, 24/7 basically. So what happens if we feed a big feed, it doesn't get digested correctly in the stomach and the small intestine, and any undigested feed ends up in their big hind gut undigested, which then gets fermented in the hind gut, which then causes massive problems with behavior issues such as flightiness and spookiness. This is what's happening too, going back to Sam with pasture. The high sugar, very highly, could be high fructan, does the same thing. It ends up in the hind gut. It's fructan, and I'm having this problem myself with my horses currently as we speak with high fructan in my pasture. Ends up not being digested, and also just gives this really big sugar hit. Then ends up in the hind gut and it ferments in the hind gut. Now that's not good if you're fermenting starch and grains, things like that. So this would definitely be happening with the horse. Firstly, the feed's too big, so I'm presuming that this dipper is a 1 kilo dipper. Okay, so we're looking at least 3 kilos of feed in one sitting. Now, you don't want to be feeding your horse more than 500 grams of feed. Okay, so concentrate type feed per 100 kilos. So just say a 500 kilo horse, you don't want to be feeding more than a 2.5 kilo dry weight matter feed. So this feed itself is easily over 2.5 kilos. Even if he was a big 17 hand horse, he's still still too much in one feed. On top of that, it's a grain feed. Okay, so the grain are very high starch feed. So one, it's high glucose. It's going to give the sugar, increase the blood sugar levels really fast with the wheat. Then it's going to go into the hind gut, and it's not going to get digested correctly in the small intestine and the stomach. Undigested grain is going to end up in the hind gut, where normally the hind gut is for your high forage, your fiber fermenting, big sort of vat of fiber fermenting for high forage fiber fermenting feeds. Okay, no grain feeds can be in there, because the fiber fermenting feeds use good bacteria. So you want your low starch, high fiber hays and native grasses are the best thing for horses. That ends up in the hind gut. That is where it's slow release energy for the horses. It creates volatile fatty acids through the fiber fermentation, which gets released. It gets absorbed through the stomach, the intestine walls, into the bloodstream, and it's used, okay, for fuel for the horses. Good fuel, good energy. Okay, it's providing good, healthy, slow release energy for the horses, like you get your low glycemic feeds for humans. So what's happening here? So you're feeding a starch feed. Unless you feed very, very small amounts. Look, I know that not all grain is bad. If you've got a thoroughbred racehorse, there is, I mean, the demands of energy or a big eventer. Sometimes grain is necessary. I'm not an equine nutritionist. Okay. So most of us aren't up at that level unless you're a racehorse trainer. Then there's, I mean, Nerida does some work with racehorses. So you can get the extruded grain. She advises never ever feed a non-extruded, non-heat grain, so non-heat treated grain. So always feed extruded or micronized grains. Personally, I avoid grains altogether. We don't need to feed them in our situation retraining off the track thoroughbreds. There's mat oils, lupins, you know, fiber, like your fiber protect, your fermented chafs and things like that are beautiful feeds. So this person here is attempting to do the right thing by their horse, because they're looking at stomach health powder, but the stomach health powder is just going to do nothing at all with this diet, and also just a waste of money. So I really think the problems with this, so that we're just going into the hind gut, so we'll go into this. I think I need a sip of coffee for this, guys. It's so detailed, this whole hind gut health thing with horses, but it's so important to know. It really is. I've got in my monthly subscription membership, I'm going to have a whole topic on health and nutrition and everything, because it's so important. It takes a lot of time for me to learn this stuff as well, because it's just like so detailed. And you have to reread over and over again, because you've got to put it all together. You've got to have this image of what happens. But then what happens? So you've got the grain feed. So just say you're feeding your horse fiber essentials, you're feeding a so-called healthy thing, or with this diet, this Minnie wants to go down. Just say bye. She's going down. The undigested grain, even extruded grain, is going to end up undigested or partially digested from the stomach. The feed in a horse's stomach and small intestine travels through fairly fast. It can't contain large feed, so if it hasn't got the time to be digested in the stomach, goes into the small intestine, then starts to go into the hind gut, where it's undigested grain. So what ferments undigested grain? The bad bacteria. So you've got your good bacteria and your bad bacteria, like our stomach, the microflora in your stomach. Like humans, you get candida, your bad bacteria. In the horse's hind gut, you get the bad bacteria, which digests, which ferments the undigested grains. And when they ferment that, they produce lactic acid. So lactic acid is not good to have in your horse. Lactic acid causes tying up in horses. It causes behavior problems in horses. It causes laminitis. It causes all these metabolic, syndromes that we're having in horses, like your Cushing's disease. And hey, I had a horse with Cushing's disease. My thoroughbred ended up getting Cushing's. I would have caused that. I would have caused that from the high grain diet that I gave him. I had him for 18 years, so I got him way back in the year 2001. So as I said, way back then, I didn't know this. Um, and he was very hot and flighty and fizzy. And I fed a lot of barley, and I even gave him pollard. I gave him pollard. He reacted to pollard, actually came out with hives, but bran, pollard, all these bran mashes I used to remember making in the riding school. I managed, took the care of the horses, and I used to make these big weekly warm bran mashes for them. You just wouldn't do that nowadays. Going back to what happens in the hindgut, the undigested grains get fermented it creates the bad bacteria in the hindgut, gets fermented, which creates lactic acid, which then gets absorbed, which first of all damages the hindgut lining. Okay. Also damages the same thing with grains, undigested grains, and grain digestion damages the stomach lining, okay, and the small intestine lining. So in the hindgut, we can't scope for hindgut ulcers, so we have to look for symptoms here. The bad bacteria creates lactic acid. It's damaging the hindgut intestinal lining, causing hindgut ulcers. Then what happens is the toxins produced by the lactic acid and the fermentation of grains gets absorbed through the damaged intestinal walls into the bloodstream, and there you get your hot, fizzy, flighty behavior. They're on edge, I know for me, if I don't have well, this is going to pasture as well, because magnesium depletion is a big thing with pasture. Calcium and magnesium is often depleted with pasture-related horses. But you know how foods can affect you? Okay, I know for me, foods will affect me and put me on edge if I'm low in magnesium as well. Same thing with horses. Can you imagine all this lactic acid being absorbed through their hindgut, which is already damaged? So they've got hindgut ulcers, which is painful. And then they're getting all these blood sugar rushes, and the toxins that don't really understand how it works, but the toxins are absorbed into the bloodstream, and that's how it then ends up going to the feet. It causes inflammation in the hindgut, inflammation in the small intestine, inflammation all throughout the horse. So can you see how it is? Their diet and their gut health is so important when it comes to spookiness and behavior and things like that, because it can have a massive effect on their behavior. So I wanted to talk about this today because it wasn't supposed to go down the whole nutrition side, but I think it's really important to know when you're addressing spooky behavior, don't look at the training first. Look at my horse's diet and really look at the ingredients that you're feeding your horse. Go back to, this is how my whole retraining, I've got a flow chart that I follow when retraining, and it's addressing your gut health. So with this horse, for instance, so just say I've emailed back to this person and I've said, well, I think the diet's the issue. The first thing I would do was address the diet completely. Don't even wean the horse off this diet. Take the horse off this diet completely. Fiber only, low starch, low sugar, fiber. Okay. And this is the problem. These types of diets are what racehorses are on all the time. A very high starch, high grain diet, low forage diet. Hence the reason when you get an off the track thoroughbred, healing their gut is really important. Don't think there's no problems with their gut, because there's nearly always going to be problems with their gut. I have horses out in my herd. They've been spelling for a year, tendon injuries and that before they come into work. I know they have gut problems, and I will address that before I expect any type of work from them. While they're on their, I'll have them scoped while they're on their, they're all on grain free now, but I have had horses on grain free diet for years, and one's still scoped for moderate to severe pyloric ulcers, and he's never had grain since I've been with him. I have had pasture issues with the fructans in the pasture, but that's just showing you that ulcers will most likely not heal if you've put your off the track thoroughbred out for a spell on pasture. and think, oh, hopefully the ulcers will heal. More likely than not, they won't heal and they'll still be there when you bring them into work. The only way to diagnose gastric ulcers is through scoping. But the thing is, it's such a world into itself, because even if you put them on omeprazole, you have them scoped, they go on a medication, it's quite often they come back. And this is where we need to address the diet, okay, and high forage, high fiber, looking at hind gut ulcers, which we can't scope for, but they're most probably there. Hind gut ulcers, you have they're girthy ulcers, they're girthy, they don't like to be touched. And yeah, the first thing is with this gentleman, with this horse, I would say take him off the diet for a start. This horse is definitely going to need to be scoped for ulcers, because I would guarantee this horse has gastric ulcers and has hind gut ulcers. There's no use treating this horse with stomach health powder while on this diet, because it's just going to be a waste of money and it's going to do nothing. Change the diet first, get them completely off would be off any concentrate feed, just salt, high fiber hay, really clean, simple diet, ad lib non-stop, low, like 24/7 access to high fiber, low starch hay, like Rhodes hay, teff hay if it's a low sugar teff hay, and lucerne hay. That's what I would do. Rhodes and lucerne, beautiful. And then get on, when I say, so some of these feeds, these packaged feeds are really good. Like Pride's Easy Sport. We're in Australia. I know over in other countries it's a bit more difficult, because in the United States, for instance, I just don't like the ingredients that they put in a lot of feeds. But check the ingredients, make sure it has no byproduct, no mill run, no mill mix, none of that, because that's all wheat, that's all grain. And it's going to damage the lining of your horse's stomach and that, because there's something in wheat itself which is which it is damaging to gut health and the lining of your horse's stomach. So I'm just waiting to hear back from this person, but I would be really, really excited to be able to help this horse, because I think it's very, very much feed related. And once again, vets don't seem to address this. A lot of vets, they will recommend one of these fattening feeds. So you need to reach out to, I would go to Feed XL. Feed XL is worldwide. Nerida Richards is amazing. In my online course, I have a tutorial in there on the Feed XL calculator. You can put everything in there. That's wonderful, the Feed XL calculator. Let me know if you want to know more about that, and I can send you a link. But diet, any behavior problems you have with your horse, look at diet, and then look at hind gut ulcers as well. There's getting scoping medication, but then with your hind gut ulcers, to heal the hind gut, you need to, one, make sure don't feed any grain at all. Two, very clean, simple diet, high forage, high. So what happens here? Okay, so looking at your hind gut, so the pH of the hind gut needs to be neutral pH of about 7. So what happens, and the same, this is what happens with gastric ulcers. There's a pH that needs to be maintained into the horse's stomach, small intestines, and hind gut. Now what happens, grains, fermenting, the bad bacteria that ferments the undigested grains in the hind gut lowers the pH level in the hind gut to very acidic. Okay, so your horse has a very acidic hind gut environment, which is very, very unhealthy, causes hind gut ulcers, is very unpleasant and stable. You can imagine that. Then, and also in the stomach. That's why they say calcium is very good to feed, your lucerne hay high in calcium, buffers the gastric acid excretion in the stomach. So it does. So it stops the pH level of the stomach getting too low. So for instance, they recommend, you know, it's really good to feed a biscuit of loosened hay or some type of loosened chaff, loosened hay preferably, because it creates saliva. Before you go out and ride, don't work your horse on an empty stomach. That's part of buffering the gastric acid in your horse's stomach, because you have to remember when they're moving, the acid splashes up all over their stomach as well. So if you've got an acidic environment, that's not good. If it's very, very low from grain feeds and that. But you can imagine the hind gut environment of a highly acidic hind gut with damaged lining. Not very pleasant for your horse. Is that going to cause your horse to be spooky and that? Yes. Plus the sugar levels and that. So, oh, wow. What a long, I've talked a lot about this and I haven't had a chance to go into the other questions that I have. So I will do another live. I'll put up a post and I'll do a question answer in the other questions in the monthly membership. So I'll pop that in there. But I hope that helps some of you. Okay, let me know in the comments if this has made sense and if this has sort of brought any light to some of the situations that you may be experiencing, or if something that you didn't know and now you know. I know I didn't know it. Many, you know, as I said, even back in 2016, I didn't know it, and now I do. And it's made a massive difference to how I feed my horses, and also how I address behavior problems with my horses. You know, girthy horses, you know, horses showing behavioral problems, I'll always look at the diet first. So, yeah, look, I'll leave it there because I have something else I need to do at 10 o'clock. But I hope that helped. Let me know. And if I didn't answer your question in this Q&A, I'll promise I'll get to it. I'll answer questions. I'll pop them up in the group as an answer to the question. I'll do another video. Anyway, yep, once again, a warm welcome to all our new members. If you have any questions, just pop up a post anytime. You can share your experiences, your struggles, your successes. I'm going to hiccup. And yeah, this group is for you guys. So I will see you in the group, and I'll see you in next week's Q&A. Okay, bye.